Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. Right now you're hearing my voice being run through the amazing Clevverb Reverb by Clevgrand. And the reason for that is that Clevgrand is giving all members of my music production club this plugin with your membership. It's a $60 value and you get that by just being a member of my club during the month of March 2020. It's a beautiful reverb that emulates different types of rooms. You've got a lot of control. You can EQ out your sound before it hits the reverb, so only, say, right now the high frequencies are touching the reverb, or you can let everything go through. You can then EQ your reverb after the fact, and this is actually a kind of fun thing to modulate. I'm wiggling around a bandpass filter. You can do some really weird effects if you want to automate that. There's some cool controls like a pre-delay that you can hear that takes the reverb a couple seconds to happen. And probably one of the coolest things, or at least a really handy thing, is the ducker. I can duck the reverb out of the way while I'm speaking, and then when I'm done speaking, the reverb comes back in. So you get those lush reverbs with the cleanliness of your original signal. You gotta act quick though, because I've only got about 25 codes left. So whatever comes first, the end of March or the end of my codes. Check out brianfunk.com/MPC to learn more about Clevverb and the Music Production Club. And go to clevgrand.se, that's KLEVGRAND.se, to learn more about Clevgrand's amazing suite of plugins. What's up, everybody? This is Brian Funk, your host of the Music Production Podcast. I'm a musician, producer, Ableton certified trainer, and all that jazz. Right now, it is March 20th, and we are all in the midst of this COVID-19 coronavirus craziness that's happening. The world is a different place. Here in New York, schools are closed, restaurants and bars are closed except for takeout, gyms closed, lots of things are closed. People aren't leaving their house. I've only left my house twice in the last week, and that was to go to the grocery store both times. Definitely strange times. Haven't seen anybody, and it's weird. I'm here today to try to talk about some things we can do while we are essentially quarantined or locked down, whatever you want to call it. The thing we really need to do is stay home, whether or not you've been mandated to do that or not. This is what we have to do. This is your part you can play. A lot of people are out in the healthcare profession, for instance, taking care of people. There are people out there doing infrastructure work that needs to be done. They're working hard, and thank you to all those people in the grocery stores and the pharmacies. Thank you all for your hard work during this difficult time. And you are keeping our society running, and that's really important to recognize. And I think we all have a part to play. We all have our civic duty right now, which is if you're not in one of those types of jobs, you got to stay home and you got to isolate yourself so that the disease does not spread so much. This is so important. I want to give you some things you can do during that time. Now, try to make a positive spin on this from here on out after the sober warning. We do have a lot of time on our hands, most of us, so we can make some good use of that. One of the things that kind of struck me as things were closing down is that live music has basically been canceled. We really can't go see live music. And if you have a live show coming up that you can go see, I urge you not to go and to stay home, because those types of gatherings can be a real dangerous thing right now where we can spread diseases to each other. But in that spirit, I wanted to just tell you, in case you don't know, I'm offering my live performance in Ableton Live video course for free, as long as you promise to stay home. I'll put the link in the show notes, but you can just click on it and there's a coupon code, stay home, no space, and you get the whole course for free. Normally it's $50. Right now, at the time I'm recording this, over 1,600 people have downloaded the course, which is so awesome. 1,600 people are hopefully watching this and maybe preparing some live performance sets. It's amazing. If you think about it, $50 per download times 1,600 is what? I don't even know. 50,000, 25. It's like $75,000 plus worth of courses that have been downloaded. So cool. So I hope that you take advantage of that. That video course I made a few years back as I was doing my own live performances and I felt I was starting to get it together. It's really everything I wish I could have found when I was doing it. It's all the difficult configurations and trial and error, blood, sweat, and tears that I went through in order to build what I think is a pretty cool live performance setup. And it applies to lots of different kinds of music. My setup is mostly, I am launching some clips, but I'm also performing synths and vocals, and I have a lot of effects that I can control, and I have control over the arrangement. So I think it's like a nice blend of different styles of live performance. And hey, if it doesn't help you, it's free. So check it out. You can get that at my site, brianfunk.com/store, and then just scroll down to the education part. You'll see the live performance thing there. And just use the code STAY HOME. I think I even have a link right now at the top of the page. So there's a little bar you can just click on. But get it. Make some use of this time, you know. This is a really great opportunity for many of us. A lot of times, time is the thing we say we don't have in order to do our music and to advance our work. Well, now we have it. So I hope the live performance course helps you. I also have a ton of free Ableton Live packs you can download, so don't forget about that too. Some other people that are doing some free stuff I wanted to draw your attention to in case you haven't heard. Korg is giving away their IK Oscillator iPhone app, and it's also for Android too. It's a great app. It's really fun. It's one of those apps that works really nicely on the touch screen. And you can make some cool jams in just a few seconds. It's compatible Ableton Link, so you can sync it up with your computer. And if you got anyone in your house, you can jam with them. And what I like about the K-Oscillator app, too, is you really don't need to know much about music to have fun with it. So this could be a fun way to jam with people in your house that are not into music or making music. And maybe you'll send them down that rabbit hole. And another cool thing about that app is you can export your projects to Ableton Live sets. So then you can edit them more further later on. Really cool. Moog is giving away their Remoog Model D app. So it's a pretty darn good recreation of the Model D. And it's free right now. I have it. I love it. It's great. It's a lot of fun. It takes the Model D into new directions like polyphony. So you can have more than one note at a time. There's no reason not to get it. It's free. You got to check it out. Heinbach is also giving away a nice collection of loops that he's made on his crazy collection of gear. He calls it isolation loops. And there's so many cool sounds, and they're really strange, far out, unusual sounds from his jams and his improvisations. Definitely check that out. There's a link in the show notes for that too. Lego Welt just announced his new sample pack of the Quasi MIDI Sirius synth, which is a digital synth from, I think, 1988, he said. It's really cool. There's a lot of fun sounds. Lego Welt always has cool sounds. He's got a lot of sample packs, too, you can download, and I think you can have a lot of fun with those, too. Also, my friend Mike Longo from Expanding Sound has some free packs, too, and he just put one out using, he put a new pack out with the Pro, the Behringer Pro, the clone of the sequential synth. Drawing a blank on the name, but check it out, expandingsound.com. He's got a lot of free packs too. Sonic Bloom, Madeline from Sonic Bloom has a lot of really great stuff too, so you got to check out her work. She's got tons of packs. She's got tons of tutorials. She'll keep you busy if you have not seen her work at sonicbloom.net. Head over there. All that stuff is in the show notes. And since we're on the topic of stuff you can have, why don't you make some stuff? Why not try to put some stuff together? Maybe a sample pack off your latest release where you give us the drum samples, say, and it might draw people to your music too. They might say, oh, these drums are cool. Let me check out the song. and you can actually use your song to advertise those loops. Or maybe you create some sort of tutorials, or I don't know. What do you know? What do you have? What do you do that might be interesting to other people? I bet if you think, you can figure something out. I love to use Gumroad for this, gumroad.com. It's a great way to get digital stuff out. You can sell it, you can make it, for sale for any price you want. It's an awesome company. I can't say enough good things about Gumroad. Had a chat with the CEO, Sahil, back in around episode 90 something. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. He's an artist, so he comes at this from the perspective of an artist. So it's a really fair deal, and it's really artist creator centric. This is also a great time to make yourself a website. Now, it's likely you're on social media. Maybe you have a Facebook or an Instagram or a Bandcamp or SoundCloud, and all that stuff's great to have. But I really think you should have your own website. And the reason for this is pretty simple. You will have full control over it. If you rely on social media pages, you really are at the mercy of whatever that company decides to do. I have learned this the hard way myself on 2 separate occasions that I can think of. The first was with MySpace. Back in the old day, MySpace was great for bands and for music. It had a player that popped up and started playing as soon as people went to your page. It was a great place to post your shows. It was really nice. One day people just stopped going to MySpace though, so all the hard work I'd put into building up a MySpace and getting lots of friends and lots of plays was suddenly pointless, didn't matter. Then the next thing was Facebook, and I didn't learn my lesson exactly, and I had a website at that point, but I wasn't stressing it as much. I thought having lots of likes was important. So when I first started doing my free Ableton Live packs, I was using a company called Topspin, which doesn't exist or is inactive, and I wouldn't recommend you use. I moved away from that to Gumroad, so you don't have to take that step. I don't know if they're even working anymore. But anyway, they had this feature where you can give a download in exchange for something. You could get an email address. You could get a like on your Facebook page. I think you can make people tweet if you wanted. I thought it'd be nice to build up my Facebook page because I thought if I had a lot of likes, it would look good. Well, that was working out pretty nicely for a while. Got a bunch of likes on the Facebook page, and I was sending out posts, and they were going to all my followers, all my fans. But then one day, Facebook changed their algorithm and started introducing the boosted post, which basically they limited your reach and charge you now for reaching your followers. In truth, it's still a really great deal if you are doing advertising. Facebook ads are really a good deal as far as the reach you get. But they changed that on me, and suddenly this channel I was relying on was no longer reliable. And that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. And I realized I need to keep things in my own control. I need to really emphasize my website, and I need to emphasize my email list. And from my perspective, email is the best thing to keep. You have control over that list. You can email everybody on your list. You can control what goes into those emails and how often they go out. That, I think, is the best thing to focus on. So maybe during this time, you make yourself a website. It doesn't have to be fancy either. People think their websites need to have a billion links. You could just do one page. And even on that one page, maybe you link out to those important social media sites you have, like your SoundCloud, your Bandcamp, or whatever you tend to focus on. On your website, you can even just embed a lot of those players right on your website, so you don't have to have people leave your site to get your work. But start simple. You can always build out later, but get yourself a website. Have a center for your work. I'm always amazed at how few people are doing this, but it's really important. And I think it makes you look more professional too. It makes you look more serious, especially if you have your own domain name, which really isn't terribly expensive. You can get a decent domain name that looks professional. It's just an indicator to people that you're taking your work seriously. So I highly recommend, if you haven't done so already, create a website. It can be super simple. One page is fine. You can develop it as you go. I like to use Squarespace because it's nice and simple. It's not an endorsement or anything. I just think it's easy to use. I used to use WordPress. WordPress is fantastic. It allows for much more customization, but I don't really want to get involved in that. I used to use WordPress and I loved it, but it was more complicated than I needed it to be. So I found Squarespace to be easier and more my style. On the last podcast I did with Tom from Elephant, he actually did the opposite. He switched from Squarespace to WordPress because he wanted more customization. I talk about that with him a little bit. So, it doesn't matter which one you use, just get yourself a website. This is also a great time to learn a new piece of gear. I'm sure you have some piece of gear, whether it's hardware, software, or even an instrument that you would like to learn better. Set up a schedule, start practicing, learning it, reading instructions, watching tutorials, but using it. Don't get caught up in the procrastination trick of just learning by watching and reading. Also actually do the practice of interacting with whatever that thing is. Play your instrument, fool around with that gear, learn the software, use the software, do it. Don't just read about it. You can, of course, do that, and it will be useful for you, but prioritize, if you're going to divide your time up, spend 80% of the time actually using the thing and then the 20% learning it. I think it's much better to learn something small and then apply it and then learn another thing and apply it rather than trying to read like a whole manual and then applying it, because you're going to probably forget all that stuff. Another thing, I've got a list here, so I'm just reading off my list. Another thing we can do is listen to music. And I mean like really listen to music. These days, music listening has become a very background thing. We put on a song while we're doing something else. We put on a playlist. I want to encourage you to sit down, get some headphones on, or if you have a nice stereo or something, sit down and just make that the thing you're doing. You're listening to music. You're focusing on it. You're actually paying attention to all the little details. My favorite way to do this is to put on headphones and lay down and just maybe close my eyes and just get sucked into the world. Listen to the mix, listen to all those little instruments, pay attention to all the little sounds and details. Think about how it was made. I know you're aware of this as a music producer, that a lot of work goes into this stuff. We put in a lot of little details all the time. Take this time to go to some of your favorite albums or a new album and listen for those details. Try to figure out what are those special things those producers made, those artists made. It can be a lot of fun, and it will almost definitely inspire you to listen, to create your own music. So listen to some music, lay down, close your eyes, enjoy. Make it an activity in of itself instead of just this background thing we do. Now, you can't really hang out with people, but you can call them. And I've been able to do this a bit in the last week. I've been calling people, FaceTiming people, and it's been nice to just have these conversations with them. I talk about this a lot with the podcast because the podcast kind of by default forces you to have conversations that are uninterrupted. And now you can do it with everybody. You can just call them. It's more than likely they're sitting around bored too. So give them a call, see how they're doing, connect. That's really important right now, is to connect with people you care about, because we are separated and human beings are social creatures. We need interaction. So call people up, let them know you're thinking about them, just see what they're doing. Sometimes a phone call without any real agenda is where the best conversations happen, because you're not trying to answer a question or find some information. You're just, hey, I'm calling to talk. Really good opportunity for that. I think this is a great opportunity to do some live streaming if you want to. And this could be really anything. I've found people will watch anything. I grew up in the 80s and 90s with Nintendo, Super Nintendo, those systems. And I can remember going over people's house and they would just play their video games and never give you a turn sometimes. And that was like, I didn't come here to watch you play video games. But now people watch people play video games online, and it's a whole industry. And it's just goes to show like you can really do anything, and people will sort of watch you. Like this voyeuristic tendency, I guess we have to see what people are doing to like kind of peek in their window, is alive and well. So it could be anything. You could be learning that new piece of software and just going through it. And who knows, you might get some people watching. They might share their own tips. They might help you. But it's also a way to connect. I found when I was doing January, it was really nice to just create my music and have people there watching me. It was nice to get the support, but probably the biggest thing about it was that you're under the gun. You're under the watchful eye. You can't fool around. It focuses you. I spoke about that in a podcast back in January. You can check that out if you like too. But live streaming is a real nice way to focus and connect with people. So it could really be anything you want. But I think it's so important we make these connections happen. So give that a shot. You can listen to podcasts, everybody, as you are doing right now. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. There's, 158 other episodes of this show at this time. So there's hundreds of hours of material for you to listen to. So get to it, enjoy. I think they're at least useful on some level. But some other podcasts I might recommend to you that I think are nice for musicians. The Live Producers Online podcast, I got to give a shout out to Dan. Dan just did a podcast about being quarantined and what you can do, and he shouted out this podcast. I thought that was pretty cool of him. We've been on each other's podcast. He's very Ableton Live focused and has a lot of guests. They talk about Ableton Live specifically, so if that's what you're into, he's a great show to listen to, Live Producers Online. I also recommend Jamie Liddell's Hanging Out with Audiophiles podcast. That's a really cool show, too. Jamie does a really nice job not only in his interviews, which are kind of casual, relaxed conversations, a little bit like this show, I'd say, but he also does some nice little segments, such as The Nitty Gritty, where he has some sort of idea that he experiments with, some musical idea or some piece of gear he wants to play with, and just kind of fools around and lets you hear the results. It's fun. It's Hanging Out with Audiophiles by Jamie Liddell. Houston Music is another great one, a new podcast by Houston Singletary. Houston is a master sound designer. He works for Ableton and their head of sound design. He's a great guy. He's a really cool guy. I will be on that show soon. We had a conversation a couple weeks ago that should be coming out soon. Houston's podcast is a little more edited, which is nice. He does a lot of work to make it sound nice. And he just released a really cool one with Michelle Darling, who is an innovator in so many parts of the music industry, sound design, music for film and TV. She did Sesame Street for a long time. She's definitely worth checking out. I highly recommend that episode. In fact, all of the episodes were great. So Houston Music, it's kind of just getting started, but it's a great podcast. It's already really well done. Like you'd think he'd been doing it for a long time. Darwin Gross's Art Plus Music Plus Technology podcast is a great podcast, and that's been going on for a long time, years and years. I got to be on that show too, and it was great to talk with Darwin. He's a really cool guy. He's very knowledgeable, especially in the Max for Live and modular world. So if you're into that stuff, he has really got a great show for you. Art plus music plus technology. Lots of great guests. There's always something to learn. I really like Song Exploder. Song Exploder is a podcast where they take a song and they get the artist to talk about how it was made. And you get to hear like a lot of the stems of the songs. You get to hear a lot of the demos, the stories behind it. It really doesn't even matter if you like the song. There's just so much good information from the artist's perspective. So if you're into creativity and that sort of stuff, this is a great show, Song Exploder. Lots of really cool artists have been on it. Lots of great songs. And I've found lots of really cool artists from it. And even the songs that weren't my style were really educational and useful. So I think you should check that out too. I want to also recommend Mr. Bill's podcast. You probably know Mr. Bill if you're listening to me. He's an amazing producer, especially in bass music. And he is one of these users of Ableton Live, when you watch him use it, he's just like, it's like he's working in 2x speed. It's like you're watching the video on double speed. He's so quick and fluent. He's got so many great ideas about workflow and his process. And he creates some really intricate music, but he does it real fast. And he has really nice informal conversations with a lot of different producers on his show. So I definitely recommend you check out Mr. Bill's podcast. You should probably also take some time to read a little bit. Why not, right? We got time. I like to listen to books a lot, but I like to read too. And I guess now that I'm not driving around as much, picking up a book has been pretty nice. Some books I want to recommend of recent listening. I've talked about The Paradox of Choice, but that's a really great book in helping you focus and make decisions. I've been listening again to some Alan Watts, which are really like lectures. I think he calls himself a stand-up philosopher. So he's like almost like a stand-up comedian meets a philosopher. His work's amazing. You got to check that out. Alan Watts. There'll be links in the show notes for these. And the most recent book I just finished was called Thinking in Bets. And Thinking in Bets was a pretty cool book about like decision making, really. And it comes from a poker player. And her name is, I'm looking it up because I forgot, Annie Duke. Annie Duke's Thinking in Bets. She has a great book on just decision making and weighing possible outcomes and some of the mistakes we make in our decision making. And one thing I think is really nice that she talks about is we often judge our decisions by how the decision turns out. And that's a real fallacy in our thinking. We get outcome focused. We might know that something has a, say, 75% chance of happening, but then we do it and it turns out it doesn't happen. Well, 25% is still 1 in 4 times. There's a good possibility that's going to happen. But the safe bet is 75%. So 3 out of 4 times you'd be right. It just so happened that one time you were wrong. That doesn't mean your decision was bad. It just means you had an unlucky outcome. So we don't want to weigh the result of our decision as much as the thought process that goes into it, which it's just a really interesting way of thinking about things from this poker player perspective where, life is a combination of, gathering your data and making smart choices, but there's also a luck aspect. And if you play poker, which I don't, but if you understand the game, like a lot of it's luck. So you're always better. There are always certain plays that are better to do, but they're not going to work out every time. And just because they don't work out every time doesn't mean you were wrong. It just means you were unlucky. I think it's a great way to look at your decision making, and it also kind of gives you more confidence in what you do, even when things don't work out. And another little takeaway I'll give you just to help recommend this book a little is a lot of times when we have goals, we try to picture like what it'll be like when it went right. And she says in her book that studies have shown that when people picture themselves with a positive outcome, they're much less successful than when they picture themselves with a negative outcome. And it was like a study in like weight loss where people pictured themselves succeeding at losing weight, and then another group pictured themselves failing. The people that pictured themselves failing lost more weight. And what she concludes is that a nice way to think is to imagine whatever you're trying to do went wrong. So you imagine it didn't work out. Now backtrack and figure out what happened to make that go wrong. And by working this way, you think about all the potential problems that can show up, and you can better prepare yourself to meet those problems when they might eventually arise. Whereas if you think about the positive way, which is often what people tell you to do, think positively, you picture it going right and you can easily miss the things that go wrong. So it's a little bit better to take this perspective of, hey, let's think about this as if it went wrong, and then say, why did it go wrong? It's a really cool book, Thinking in Bets. It's a 6-hour listen, or faster if you want to do faster time, 1.5 maybe. But I think it's a nice book that helps. Okay. Couple more things on my list here. Two more things. In my last interview with Elephant Tom, he talked about making good of your graveyard of unfinished ideas. So it's very likely you have a lot of unfinished ideas on your computer, as I do. Well, why not go back into those sessions and make sample packs out of them? Find the cool stuff. Like maybe it was a beat you made that you liked. Well, make that into a sample and put it in a folder. Maybe call that folder something like Someday Maybe or New Ideas or whatever you want to call it. And just start building up a collection of things you can use in the future. What I like about this approach is, I mean, if we're being honest here, we're probably not ever going to finish those unfinished ideas anyway. At least now we're making something of them. And we're also sort of like, I don't know, maybe it's like eliminating some of the guilt you might feel, like I never finish anything. Well, you don't have to necessarily. You can at least source something useful. And if you think about it, if you have like say 5 projects and you don't finish 4 of them, you got 4 starters now. You got 4 different sessions to mine ideas from. So maybe that's an exercise you can do during this time. And the last one I'll give you is take some time to organize your studio, fix it up, make it nicer to work in, or clean an area of your living space that you can use for a studio. Do some maintenance stuff, restring your guitar strings, do the kinds of things that you don't always have time for. I managed to get the old broken refrigerator out of the garage this week. It's been sitting there for over a year. I've been thinking it's such a big project. It's become this major task in my life that I worry about. I was able to get it out of my house in about 30 minutes to an hour. I had to empty out some of the things in there because it's become like a shelving unit. But I emptied that out and it was out of the house within an hour. And called up the town to find out how I can dispose of it. They told me when to put it out, and I put it out, and 20 minutes later, someone drove by and put it on their truck. So it's just funny. I bring this up because sometimes these things that we put on our to-do lists get so big in our head, and they really don't take a lot of time. It's just a matter of doing it and buckling down, and now we've got some time. So let's make use of it. And I think I'll stop there for now. I've got some cool podcasts coming up because a lot of people have a lot of free time. They seem to be more willing to talk to me. They've got more time open, I guess, as do I. My schedule is a little more free too. But I want to just end with a little emphasis on how important it is to stay home and to do the right thing and to listen to what the news is telling you, what the experts especially. Don't pay attention to the people with political motivations, which so many people have, but really try to listen to the people that know what they're talking about, the scientists, the experts, the World Health Organization, the Center for Disease Control, all of these places that aren't as politically motivated as maybe the local politician might be. The way we can do our part is by staying home and understand that you are playing an important part by doing that. You are important. Right now, this is one of the biggest challenges we've faced in our generation, my generation, where we need to work together to do this. This is our war effort in a way. We have some pretty dire predictions of what could happen if we don't, and that might still happen anyway. So we need to do everything we can. This is a really unpredictable time. It's scary, and it's not to be taken lightly. So I thank you for doing your part, staying home. And if you are a worker in some essential job where you have to be out there, I thank you too, because that's super important too. Times like this really show us how fragile our society is and how thin a thread civilization is hanging on by. It really requires us all working together. This society we have on Earth here is a well-oiled machine that really needs to be working well, and times like this really expose how vulnerable it is. So do your part, stay in, download some of that free stuff, get my live performance course, learn how to play live, build a live set. And then one day when we are all able to come out again, we can celebrate with some new live music, maybe during this time, lots of really cool new material will be created for us to all learn from and enjoy. But we have to do our part, or else we might not get to see that. So I thank you very much for listening. I will be trying to do as much as I can to keep you entertained and amused with some podcasts, some downloads. I think there's some cool stuff coming out my way in the next few days and weeks. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for taking the time to listen. And go make the most of this time. In some weird way, we can take a positive spin on this and see this as a chance to do a lot of things we have been putting off and refocus on the things that are important to us. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day and stay healthy.